Millionaire businessman dismisses the unusual inheritance left to his brother. A simple chicken hides the potential to change lives. A controversial will reignites a family rivalry. A conflict threatens to destroy everything his father left behind. The golden light of dusk bathed the colorful streets of Springville, tinting the colonial buildings with shades of amber and crimson. Ethan Harrison contemplated the city from the small terrace of his apartment, his easel strategically positioned to capture the essence of that unique landscape. His fingers, stained with paint, held a brush suspended in the air, while his thoughts wandered to the meeting that would take place the following day. Sarah, his girlfriend, approached silently from behind, placing a cup of coffee on the small table next to the easel. The familiar aroma brought Ethan back to reality. "You're worried about tomorrow, aren't you?" asked Sarah, her brown eyes conveying understanding and affection. Ethan nodded, finally lowering his brush. "It's strange to think that it's been only a month since Dad passed away," he replied, his voice laden with emotion. "And tomorrow, well, tomorrow we'll know his last wishes." On the other side of town, in the luxurious office of Harrison Enterprises, Michael Harrison was signing the last documents of the day. Through the large glass windows, one could see the empire he had helped build, a network of hotels and shopping centers that stretched across the entire country. His secretary entered discreetly, reminding him of the time for the reading of the will the next day. "Carol, cancel all morning appointments," he ordered, adjusting his Italian silk tie, "and prepare the quarterly report for the afternoon. I'm sure it will be a productive day." The next morning, the office of the family lawyer, Mr. Roberts, was immersed in a tense silence. Ethan arrived first, wearing his best blazer, still looking too casual compared to Michael's impeccable suit, who entered minutes later. The brothers exchanged a distant nod, the formality between them evidencing years of estrangement. Mrs. Eleanor, the family matriarch, sat between her sons, her elegant and serene presence serving as the only point of balance in the room. Mr. Roberts cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses before beginning the reading. "Being these the last wishes of Mr. Robert Harrison," he began, his monotonous voice echoing through the room. The first provisions were predictable. Michael would inherit 75% of the company's shares, as well as strategic properties across the country. His face displayed a discreet smile of satisfaction, while his fingers drummed softly on the arm of the armchair. Ethan listened to everything with resignation, expecting his part to be some minor property or a minority stake in the company. However, when the lawyer reached his part, the silence in the room became even denser. "To Ethan Harrison, my youngest son, I leave Goldie, the chicken I keep at my country house, along with these words: the greatest fortunes come in the most unexpected packages." Michael couldn't contain a short, disdainful laugh, which was immediately silenced by a severe look from his mother. Ethan remained motionless, his face a mask of confusion and disbelief. Mr. Roberts continued reading, mentioning an additional clause that would remain sealed for now, only to be revealed under specific circumstances that would be monitored by himself. After the reading, while Michael hurried to make important calls, Ethan remained seated, trying to process what had just happened. His mother approached, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Your father always had reasons for everything he did, honey," she said softly. "Perhaps you need to look beyond the obvious to understand this one." That night, Ethan and Sarah visited the country house to meet his peculiar inheritance. Goldie was a chicken of singular appearance, with golden feathers and a distinguished bearing. While Sarah, with her veterinary knowledge, examined the bird with growing interest, Ethan observed the small animal that his father had considered an appropriate legacy. "Ethan, there's something different about this chicken," commented Sarah, frowning in concentration. "Its physical structure, the coloration. It's not a common breed." Ethan picked up a yellowed envelope he found in the coop, addressed to him in his father's characteristic handwriting. Inside, there was only one sentence. "Sometimes, the greatest treasure is hidden in the most unlikely place. Trust the process, son." As the sun set over Springville, Ethan contemplated Goldie with a new look. Maybe, just maybe, his father had left more than a simple chicken. Maybe there was a greater purpose behind that unusual gift, a purpose he still needed to discover. In the small kitchen of his apartment, Ethan watched Sarah perform yet another of her meticulous examinations on Goldie. 3 weeks had passed since the reading of the will, and each day brought new discoveries about the peculiar inheritance. The veterinarian had transformed a corner of the living room into a small improvised laboratory where she spent hours studying the golden chicken. "It's extraordinary, Ethan," exclaimed Sarah, her eyes shining with enthusiasm as she analyzed the results of her latest tests. "Goldie isn't just a pretty chicken. Her genetic structure is unique. She has a natural resistance to diseases that normally affect other birds, and her eggs, well, the nutritional levels are impressive." Ethan left his half-empty coffee cup on the counter, approaching to examine his girlfriend's notes. Sarah's notebooks were full of graphs, numbers, and detailed observations. Among the pages, a comparison between Goldie's eggs and conventional eggs stood out. "Look at this," continued Sarah, pointing to a series of data. "The protein content is 30% higher, the omega-3 levels are exceptional, and there's a unique combination of nutrients that I've never seen in common eggs." Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Michael presided over another tense meeting in the main office of Harrison Enterprises. The numbers from the last quarter were not encouraging, and the pressure from shareholders was increasing every day. His aggressive management style was beginning to show cracks, with disgruntled employees and hesitant business partners. "We need a new strategy," declared one of the directors, nervously adjusting his tie. "The market is changing. Consumers are more aware, seeking companies with social and environmental responsibility." Michael dismissed the observation with an impatient gesture, but the words kept echoing in his mind. After the meeting, alone in his office, his eyes fell on an old family photo. In it, his father smiled alongside employees in one of the first stores in the chain, the environment conveying a sense of community that had long been lost. Back at Ethan's apartment, an idea was beginning to take shape. Sitting on his small balcony, watching Goldie pecking peacefully in an improvised enclosure, he recalled his father's last words. "The greatest fortunes come in the most unexpected packages." "What if," he began, turning to Sarah, "what if we turned this into something bigger? Not just a special chicken, but an entire project focused on sustainable agriculture." Sarah looked up from her notes, intrigued. "Go on." "We could start an organic farm," explained Ethan, his voice gaining enthusiasm. "Use Goldie's DNA to develop a healthier line of birds, create a production model that respects the environment and the animals." As he spoke, Ethan began to sketch his ideas in his drawing notebook. He visualized a modern farm, but integrated with nature, with green areas, solar energy systems, and adequate spaces for the birds. His quick strokes gave life to a dream that was beginning to seem increasingly tangible. "We could call it Golden Dawn," suggested Sarah, infected by her boyfriend's enthusiasm, "in honor of Goldie and the new beginning she represents." In the following days, the couple immersed themselves in research. Sarah used her contacts in the veterinary community to better understand the technical aspects of poultry farming, while Ethan studied sustainable business models and organic agriculture. On a particularly productive afternoon, they received a visit from Mr. Johnson, a local farmer that Sarah knew from her work with farm animals. The man, with decades of experience in the field, listened attentively to the couple's plans. "Do you have a piece of land in mind?" he asked, after examining Goldie with evident admiration. Ethan hesitated. The financial aspect was still a significant obstacle. His work as an art teacher and Sarah's veterinary appointments barely covered their monthly expenses. "I have a plot of land," continued Mr. Johnson, noticing the hesitation. "It's been idle for years, but the soil is good. If you want, we can make a partnership. You bring in the knowledge and the birds, I provide the land." The proposal was like a missing piece in the puzzle. Ethan felt for the first time since his father's passing that he was on the right path. That night, while organizing ideas for the project, he found another envelope between the pages of an old book of his father's. Inside, there was only one phrase: "True success is not measured only by profit, but by the positive impact we cause in the world." The words seemed more meaningful now, as if his father had predicted exactly the moment when Ethan would find them. With Goldie sleeping peacefully on her improvised perch and Sarah asleep over her notes on the couch, Ethan began to write the business plan for Golden Dawn, feeling that he was about to embark on a much bigger journey than he had ever imagined. The sun had barely peeked over the horizon when Ethan and Sarah arrived at Mr. Johnson's land. The property, located on the outskirts of Springville, was a mixture of open fields and wooded areas, with a crystal-clear stream winding through the property. As they walked through the land, the couple could feel the potential pulsing beneath their feet. "Here," said Ethan, stopping in a natural clearing, "we can build the first chicken coops. We have natural shade, access to water, and enough space for the birds to move freely." Sarah nodded, already visualizing the ideal layout to ensure the well-being of the future inhabitants. "And there," she pointed to a more elevated area, "we can install solar panels to make the operation more sustainable." As they animatedly discussed the project details, Mr. Johnson watched them with a nostalgic smile. "You know," he began, adjusting his straw hat, "this land has been in my family for generations. Seeing you young folks with so much passion and respect for the land, well, it makes an old man happy." In the following weeks, Golden Dawn began to take shape. Ethan and Sarah invested all their savings in the project, complemented by a small loan they managed to get with Mr. Johnson's help. The first chicken coop was built with sustainable materials, designed to maximize the comfort and health of the birds. Goldie, now the matriarch of the farm, quickly adapted to the new environment. Sarah spent days observing and documenting the golden chicken's behavior, collecting precious data that would be fundamental for developing the special lineage. One afternoon, while Ethan was painting a colorful mural on the external wall of the chicken coop, Sarah ran towards him, carefully holding something. "Ethan, look," she exclaimed, opening her hands to reveal a golden egg shining like the setting sun. Goldie's first egg on the new farm. That egg symbolized more than the start of production. It was the realization of a dream, proof that they were on the right path. Ethan took the egg with reverence, feeling its weight and admiring its unique beauty. "Let's analyze its properties immediately," said Sarah, already heading towards the small laboratory they had set up in a renovated shed. Meanwhile, in the city, Michael was facing his own challenges. The pressure for immediate results led him to make increasingly aggressive decisions, alienating partners and employees. In a particularly tense meeting, one of his oldest managers, Frank, confronted him. "Michael, we're losing the essence of what your father built," argued Frank, his voice laden with concern. "He always prioritized people, the community. Now, everything comes down to numbers on a spreadsheet." The words hit Michael like a punch. For a moment, he saw his father's reflection in Frank's worried face. He abruptly dismissed the meeting, locking himself in his office to reflect. Back at the farm, Ethan and Sarah were euphoric with the results of the analysis of Goldie's first egg. "It's amazing," exclaimed Sarah, showing the data to Ethan. "The nutritional levels are even higher than we expected. This egg has the potential to revolutionize the poultry industry." Excited by the discovery, the couple decided it was time to share their project with the world. Ethan, using his artistic skills, created a striking visual identity for Golden Dawn. Sarah, in turn, prepared an explanatory video about the nutritional benefits and the ethical production process. "We should use social media," suggested Ethan. "It's an economical way to reach a wider audience." Thus, the Golden Dawn social media page was born. The first post, a short video showing Goldie in her new home, accompanied by a brief explanation about the project, was an instant success. People were enchanted by the story of the golden chicken and intrigued by the promise of super nutritious eggs. Enthusiastic comments began to appear. "Finally, someone thinking about sustainable agriculture. Where can I buy these eggs? They look incredible. This is the farm of the future." The growing interest brought not only enthusiasm, but also challenges. Orders started to arrive, far beyond the current production capacity of the small farm. Ethan and Sarah realized they would need to expand faster than they had initially planned. One night, while discussing growth strategies, they received an unexpected visit. Mrs. Eleanor, Ethan's mother, appeared at the door of the small house they had built on the property. "Honey," she said, hugging her son, "I came to see with my own eyes what you're building here." Her eyes shone with a mixture of pride and contained emotion. As Ethan showed his mother around the farm, explaining every detail of the project, Mrs. Eleanor listened attentively, occasionally nodding with approval. At the end of the tour, she took her son's hands in hers. "Your father would be so proud, Ethan," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "You understood his message. You're building something meaningful, something that goes beyond money." His mother's words strengthened Ethan's determination. That night, after Mrs. Eleanor left, he and Sarah stayed up late planning the next steps. The farm was growing, and with it the hope for a more sustainable and ethical future in food production. Meanwhile, in his office in the city, Michael found himself immersed in thoughts, his eyes fixed on his father's photo. Frank's words echoed in his mind, mixing with memories of advice his father had given him years ago. For the first time in a long time, Michael began to question the path he had chosen. The dawn at Golden Dawn brought with it a symphony of sounds, the clucking of chickens, the singing of birds, and the buzz of workers arriving for another day of activities. In recent months, the farm had grown exponentially. What had started with Goldie and a handful of chickens was now a thriving enterprise. Ethan walked among the chicken coops, proudly observing how each structure reflected the principles of sustainability and animal welfare that he and Sarah had established. The birds had space to scratch freely, abundant shade, and access to balanced organic feed. Sarah, for her part, was in the improvised laboratory, analyzing the latest batches of eggs. Her eyes sparkled with enthusiasm as she compared the results. "Ethan," she called, as soon as she saw him pass through the door, "come see this. The eggs from the new generation are maintaining the same nutritional quality as Goldie's. The selective breeding process is working." The couple embraced, celebrating another victory. However, the sound of a phone interrupted the moment. It was Matt, the new sales manager they had hired to deal with the growing demand. "Boss, we have a problem," Matt's voice sounded worried. "The Star supermarket chain wants to triple their order for next month. I don't know if we'll have enough production." Ethan frowned, feeling the weight of responsibility. Sudden success brought new challenges with it. "Let's meet in an hour to discuss this," he replied, exchanging a concerned look with Sarah. Meanwhile, at the Harrison Enterprises headquarters, Michael was facing his own dilemmas. The aggressive strategies he had implemented were beginning to show their negative consequences. Disgruntled employees, hesitant business partners, and a growing wave of criticism on social media about the company's unethical practices. Sitting in his luxurious office, Michael was leafing through a folder with the latest financial reports when his assistant hurriedly entered. "Mr. Harrison, I think you should see this," she said, handing him a tablet. On the screen, a viral video showed the Golden Dawn farm. The camera panned over the verdant fields, focused on the happy chickens, and ended with Ethan passionately explaining about sustainable agriculture. Michael watched in silence, a mixture of emotions passing over his face. Pride in his brother's success, a twinge of envy, and surprisingly, a spark of inspiration. "Schedule a visit to the farm for next week," he ordered his assistant. "It's time to see firsthand what my little brother is up to." Back at the farm, Ethan, Sarah, and the small team were meeting to discuss the challenge of increasing production. Ideas were flowing, expanding facilities, hiring more employees, seeking partnerships with local farmers. "What if we offered training to other producers in the region?" suggested Sarah. "We could share our techniques, create a network of associated farms." The idea was received with enthusiasm. Not only would it solve the production problem, but it would also expand the positive impact of the project on the local community. As they discussed the details, Mr. Johnson entered the meeting room, his normally serene face marked by concern. "I have news," he said, his voice grave. "AgriFuture, that big agricultural corporation, is buying land in the region. They say they're planning a massive, intensive poultry operation." The announcement fell like a bomb among those present. AgriFuture was known for its aggressive and unsustainable practices. Their arrival could mean a threat not only to Golden Dawn, but to the entire community of small producers in the region. "We need to prepare," declared Ethan, his voice firm despite the evident concern. "Let's accelerate our expansion plans and strengthen our local partnerships. Our strength lies in the quality and ethics of our work." In the days that followed, the farm was buzzing with activity. Ethan and Sarah worked tirelessly, dividing themselves between supervising production, training new employees, and developing strategies to face the AgriFuture threat. One afternoon, while Ethan was painting a new mural at the farm's entrance, a vibrant scene depicting harmony between humans, animals, and nature, a luxury car parked nearby. To his surprise, Michael stepped out of the vehicle, looking out of place in his expensive suit amid the simplicity of the farm. "Little brother," Michael greeted, an enigmatic smile on his lips. Looks like you've found your calling after all. Ethan came down from the ladder, wiping his paint-stained hands on a cloth. Michael, what are you doing here? I came to see with my own eyes what everyone's talking about, Michael replied, his eyes scanning the environment. I must admit I'm impressed. The brothers walked around the property, Ethan passionately explaining every aspect of the project. Michael listened attentively, occasionally asking insightful questions about the business model and sustainable practices. At the end of the tour, standing in front of the chicken coop where Goldie lived, Michael surprised Ethan with an unexpected proposal. What if Harrison Enterprises invested in Golden Dawn, he suggested. We could expand this to a larger scale, compete directly with companies like AgriFuture. Ethan was momentarily speechless, caught between the temptation of the offer and caution about his brother's intentions. Before he could respond, Sarah joined them, bringing urgent news. Ethan, I just found out. AgriFuture is making aggressive offers to buy neighboring lands. They're pressuring local farmers. The moment of tension between the brothers was interrupted by the reality of the imminent threat. Ethan looked from Sarah to Michael, aware that the decisions he would make in the coming days could shape not only the future of Golden Dawn, but of the entire community around him. As the sun set on the horizon, painting the sky with gold and pink hues, Ethan felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. The farm that had begun as an unlikely dream was now at the center of a larger battle, a fight for the soul of agriculture in the region. Ethan's improvised office in the barn was immersed in tense silence. Sarah, Michael, and Mr. Johnson surrounded a table covered with maps and documents. The heavy air carried not only the aroma of fresh hay, but also the gravity of imminent decisions. AgriFuture has already acquired 3 neighboring properties, explained Mr. Johnson, his calloused finger tracing a line on the map. If they get 2 more, they'll have control over the main water resources in the region. Ethan ran his hand through his hair, concern evident on his face. This would affect not just our farm, but the entire community of small farmers. Michael, who had been observing in silence until then, leaned over the table. Brother, my offer still stands. With Harrison Enterprises resources, we could compete on equal footing with AgriFuture. Sarah cast a cautious look at Ethan. Michael's proposal was tempting, but they both knew it came with its own complications. Michael, Ethan began, carefully choosing his words, I appreciate the offer, but we need to think beyond simply competing. This is about protecting a way of life, a sustainable form of agriculture. At that moment, a knock on the door interrupted the conversation. Matt, the sales manager, entered hurriedly, holding a tablet. Boss, you need to see this, he said, placing the device on the table. On the screen, a promotional video from AgriFuture showed images of a high-tech industrial farm, promising to revolutionize poultry production in the region. The contrast between AgriFuture's cold, mechanized vision and Golden Dawn's ethical and sustainable approach couldn't have been more striking. That's it, exclaimed Sarah, her eyes shining with a sudden idea. What if, instead of competing directly, we educated the public? Show them the real difference between our approach and AgriFuture's? Ethan nodded enthusiastically. An awareness campaign. We could use social media, organize farm visits, maybe even a sustainable agriculture festival. Michael observed the interaction with a mixture of admiration and reflection. Ethan and Sarah's passion and idealism were contagious, reminding him of the early days of Harrison Enterprises, when his father talked about building something meaningful, not just profitable. I can help with that, Michael offered, surprising everyone. I have media contacts, I can arrange interviews, news coverage. Let's show the world what you're doing here. Michael's unexpected gesture brought a moment of emotion to the group. Ethan, overcoming years of estrangement, hugged his brother. Thank you, Michael. This means a lot. In the days that followed, Golden Dawn transformed into a whirlwind of activity. Ethan and Sarah led the front, organizing a series of educational events. Local farmers, students, and even curious city dwellers began to flock to the farm, eager to learn about sustainable practices. Michael, fulfilling his promise, used his influence to bring media attention. Journalists from all over the country began to arrive, captured by the David versus Goliath story that was unfolding. One afternoon, as Ethan was conducting a tour for a group of college students, a reporter from a major national newspaper approached. "Mr. Harrison," she began, "your farm is gaining a lot of attention. Some are calling you revolutionaries of sustainable agriculture. How do you respond to that?" Ethan smiled, looking around at the happy chickens, the green fields, and the animated faces of the visitors. "We're not revolutionaries," he replied. "We're just reminding people of something we've always known, that there's a way to produce food that respects the land, the animals, and the people." The reporter continued, "And what about AgriFuture? They claim your approach is outdated and inefficient." "Efficiency shouldn't come at the cost of ethics or the health of the planet," Ethan countered. "We invite AgriFuture and everyone else to come here, see what we're doing. We believe there's room for everyone, as long as we respect certain fundamental principles." Meanwhile, at AgriFuture headquarters, CEO Richard Miller watched with growing frustration the news about Golden Dawn. What had begun as a small obstacle in his plans now threatened to become a regional movement. "We need to act," he declared to his executives. "Offer double to the farmers who haven't sold yet, and start an aggressive marketing campaign. Let's show the public that our approach is the future of agriculture." Back at the farm, night was falling on a scene of celebration. An improvised sustainable agriculture festival was in full swing. Stalls sold local products, musicians played traditional songs, and at the center of it all, a huge screen displayed a documentary about Golden Dawn's journey. Ethan, Sarah, Michael, and Mr. Johnson observed the scene with a mixture of pride and apprehension. They had managed to draw attention to their cause, but they knew the battle was far from over. "What happens now?" asked Sarah, her voice low, almost lost in the buzz of the party. Ethan took her hand, squeezing it gently. "Now we continue. Every egg, every happy chicken, every acre of preserved land is a victory. We can't stop." Michael, who had spent the last few days immersed in the reality of the farm, seemed thoughtful. "You know, little brother," he said, "I think Dad always knew what he was doing when he left you that chicken." The words hung in the air, laden with meaning. The mention of their father brought to the surface memories and emotions long buried. For a moment, the Harrison brothers were united again, not just by blood ties, but by a common purpose. As the party continued around them, Ethan couldn't help but think about the future. AgriFuture was still a threat, and the challenges of expanding their sustainable vision were immense. But looking at the people gathered, celebrating not just a farm, but an idea, he felt a wave of hope. Golden Dawn was no longer just a dream, it was a movement. And movements, Ethan knew, had the power to change the world. The sun had barely risen when Ethan was awakened by urgent knocks on his door. Upon opening it, he was faced with Mr. Johnson's worried face. "Ethan, son, we have problems," said the old farmer, his voice trembling. "AgriFuture has started construction on a large industrial facility on the neighboring property. They're using heavy machinery day and night." Quickly dressing, Ethan followed Mr. Johnson to the property line. The sound of tractors and excavators filled the air, in stark contrast to the usual birdsong. On the horizon, a huge metal structure was beginning to rise, threatening. Sarah joined them moments later, her eyes wide at the scene. "This is an ecological disaster waiting to happen," she muttered. "That area is crucial for the region's water balance." As they watched, a group of local workers passed by them, heading to AgriFuture's construction site. Ethan recognized some faces. They were small farmers who, under financial pressure, had accepted work at the new facility. "We need to act fast," declared Ethan, his mind already working on possible solutions. "Sarah, contact our environmental partners. We're going to need an urgent impact assessment. Mr. Johnson, gather the other farmers. We have to present a united front." Back at the main house, Ethan found Michael on the phone, already aware of the situation. "I'm mobilizing our legal team," his older brother informed. "There might be legal loopholes we can exploit to delay construction." The news of AgriFuture's aggressive expansion spread quickly. Throughout the day, Golden Dawn transformed into a center of resistance. Environmentalists, lawyers, journalists, and concerned residents began to arrive, seeking information and offering support. Sarah organized a team of biologists and geologists to conduct an emergency environmental impact study. Their initial findings were alarming. The construction threatened a vital aquifer and could cause irreparable damage to the local ecosystem. Meanwhile, Ethan led a tense meeting with local farmers. Many were divided, fearing retaliation from AgriFuture, but also concerned about the future of their lands. "I understand your fear," said Ethan, his voice laden with emotion. "But if we don't act now, we might lose everything our families have worked for generations. This isn't just about our farms, but about the future of our children and grandchildren." Ethan's words seemed to touch something deep in those present. One by one, the farmers began to express their support, willing to unite against the common threat. As the day progressed, tension in the region increased. Reporters began to arrive, attracted by the story of the conflict. Ethan gave interviews, highlighting not only the environmental risks, but also the importance of sustainable agriculture for the community. "We're not against progress," he explained to a TV camera, "but we believe that true progress respects nature and local communities. What AgriFuture is doing isn't progress, it's destruction disguised as development." As night fell, Ethan, Sarah, Michael, and Mr. Johnson gathered again to assess the situation. The preliminary report from the environmentalists was concerning, indicating potential violations of environmental laws by AgriFuture. "This could be our chance to stop the construction legally," said Michael, examining the documents. "But we need to act fast before they cause irreversible damage." Sarah, who had spent hours on the phone with contacts in environmental organizations, brought more news. "I managed to schedule a public hearing for next week. It will be our chance to present our concerns directly to the authorities." Ethan nodded, grateful for Sarah's initiative. "We need to prepare well for this hearing. It will be our best chance to stop AgriFuture." As they discussed strategies, Matt entered the room hurriedly. "Boss, you need to see this," he said, turning on the television. On the screen, AgriFuture's CEO Richard Miller was giving a press conference. His expression was one of calculated confidence as he spoke. "We understand the community's concerns," he was saying, his voice smooth and convincing. "But our facility will bring jobs and prosperity to the region. We are committed to the best environmental practices and want to work in harmony with local farmers." Ethan watched the interview with a mixture of anger and frustration. Miller's words sounded hollow, a corporate facade that hid the true nature of their actions. "He's trying to win public opinion," observed Michael, his business experience evident. "And unfortunately, he has the resources to run a very effective PR campaign." Sarah, always practical, was already formulating a plan. "We need to counterattack with the truth. Let's organize guided tours of our farm, show people what sustainable agriculture really means, and we can use social media to share real stories from local farmers." Ethan agreed, feeling a renewed determination. "You're right. We can't allow AgriFuture to control the narrative. This is our land, our story, and we're going to fight for it with everything we've got." As the group continued to plan their strategy, outside, the sounds of AgriFuture's construction echoed into the night. It was a constant reminder of the battle that was approaching, a fight not just for a farm, but for the future of an entire region. Ethan approached the window, looking out at the fields he loved so much. On the horizon, the lights of AgriFuture's construction site shone like a challenge. He knew that the coming days would be crucial, testing not only his determination, but also the strength of the community they had built. With a deep sigh, he turned to the group. "Let's get to work," he said, his voice firm. "And we have a long battle ahead, and every minute counts." The rising sun painted Springville's sky with shades of orange and pink as the first buses began to arrive at golden dawn. Ethan, who had barely slept in the last few nights, watched from the porch of the main house as a steady stream of people descended from the vehicles. Students, environmentalists, journalists, and local residents, all gathered for what promised to be a decisive day. Sarah joined him, handing him a steaming cup of coffee. "Are you ready for this?" she asked, her voice mixing concern and determination. Ethan nodded, taking a sip of coffee. "We have to be. Today is the day we make our voice heard." The day that followed was a whirlwind of activities. Ethan and his team had organized a series of events to show the public and authorities the true value of Golden Dawn and the potential impact of AgriFuture's expansion. Michael, surprising everyone with his engagement, led a group of businessmen and investors on a tour of the farm. "See," he explained, gesturing to the verdant fields, "here we have a business model that is not only profitable but also sustainable and ethical. It's possible to succeed without destroying the environment." Sarah, in turn, coordinated a team of scientists and environmentalists who conducted practical demonstrations about the farm's ecological impact. In a specially prepared area, they showed how Golden Dawn's practices helped preserve soil and water quality. "Compare this to what AgriFuture is proposing," she explained to a group of reporters. "Our practices regenerate the soil. Theirs, they'll exhaust it in a matter of years." Mr. Johnson and other local farmers shared their stories, talking about how the partnership with Golden Dawn had transformed their lives and their lands. Their voices, laden with emotion and authenticity, deeply touched the listeners. At the center of it all was Ethan, moving from group to group, answering questions, offering insights, and above all, sharing his passionate vision of a future where agriculture and conservation go hand in hand. As the day progressed, it became clear that the event was having a significant impact. Social media was buzzing with posts and videos from Golden Dawn, many using the hashtag #LetusSaveOurLands, which quickly went viral. However, not everything was running smoothly. A group of workers hired by AgriFuture showed up, protesting against what they called a threat to jobs, represented by the opposition to the new factory. Ethan, seeing the potential for conflict, approached the group. "I understand your concerns," he said, his voice calm but firm. "But think about the long term. The jobs AgriFuture offers are temporary. What we're proposing here is a sustainable future for all of us, with lasting jobs that don't destroy our land." His words seemed to reach some of the protesters, who began to exchange uncertain looks. Meanwhile, at Springville City Hall, a crucial meeting was underway. The mayor and council members were heatedly debating the situation. The pressure from AgriFuture was intense, with promises of massive investments and job creation. On the other hand, the growing movement around Golden Dawn could not be ignored. Back at the farm, the day's climax came with a live broadcast to the entire country. Ethan, Sarah, Michael, and Mr. Johnson positioned themselves in front of the cameras, with the farm's natural beauty as a backdrop. Ethan took the floor, his voice clear and passionate, echoing to millions of viewers. "What's at stake here is not just a farm or a business. It's our future. It's how we choose to live in harmony with nature. AgriFuture offers a vision of progress that destroys our land and our traditions. We offer a different path, one where prosperity and sustainability go hand in hand," Sarah complimented, presenting scientific data on the positive environmental impact of their practices. Michael spoke about the economic viability of the sustainable model. And Mr. Johnson, with tears in his eyes, appealed for the preservation of a centuries-old way of life. As the sun set, casting long shadows over the fields, it became clear that the day had been a success. Public opinion was shifting, and the pressure on authorities to reconsider approval of the AgriFuture project was increasing. Exhausted but hopeful, Ethan and Sarah walked hand in hand through the orchard at dusk. The distant sound of AgriFuture's machines could still be heard, a reminder of the battle that was yet to come. "Do you think we made a difference today?" asked Sarah, her voice low. Ethan stopped, looking at the horizon where the lights of Springville were beginning to shine. "I think so," he replied. "But this is just the beginning. The real test will come in the next few days." That night, as the farm finally quieted down, Ethan couldn't sleep. Sitting on the porch, he reflected on everything that had happened. The journey since that fateful day when he inherited Goldie seemed surreal. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps. Michael emerged from the shadows, joining him on the porch. "You know, little brother," Michael began, his voice unusually soft, "I think I finally understand what Dad meant with that strange inheritance of his." Ethan looked at his brother, curious. Michael continued, "It wasn't about the chicken or about money, it was about finding something worth fighting for, something bigger than ourselves." The brothers sat in silence for a moment, the words hanging in the night air. It was a moment of mutual understanding, perhaps the first in many years. Meanwhile, in the city, the mayor of Springville was receiving an urgent call. The voice on the other end of the line was tense. "Sir, we have a problem. The water analyses near AgriFuture's construction site. The results are alarming." The mayor felt the weight of the decision he would have to make. The next few hours would be crucial, not just for Golden Dawn, but for the future of the entire region. The following morning dawned with an atmosphere charged with tension. Ethan was awakened by the insistent sound of his cell phone. It was the mayor of Springville, his grave voice conveying the urgency of the situation. "Mr. Harrison, we need to meet immediately. Complications have arisen with the AgriFuture project." Within an hour, Ethan, Sarah, and Michael were gathered in the mayor's office. The politicians' worried countenance was evident as soon as they entered. The water quality tests near AgriFuture's construction site have revealed alarming levels of contaminants, explained the mayor, spreading reports across his desk. It seems their preliminary operations are already affecting the water table. Sarah, with her biology expertise, quickly examined the documents. This is a potential ecological disaster, she declared, concern evident in her voice. If this continues, the entire region's watershed could be compromised. The mayor nodded gravely. I've already ordered a temporary suspension of AgriFuture's works, but they're pushing hard to continue. They claim the results are inconclusive and promise to implement containment measures. Ethan exchanged glances with Michael and Sarah. Mr. Mayor, he began, this is exactly what we feared from the beginning. AgriFuture isn't interested in the well-being of our community or the environment. They only care about their profits. Michael, surprising everyone, added, as a businessman, I understand the importance of economic development, but not at the cost of the health and future of our region. There are responsible ways to grow, and what AgriFuture is doing isn't one of them. The mayor seemed torn, the weight of the decision clearly visible on his face. I understand your concerns, but the political pressure is intense. AgriFuture promises substantial jobs and investments that won't be worth anything if they destroy our natural resources, interrupted Sarah, her voice firm. Mr. Mayor, you have a choice to make, one that will affect future generations. As the meeting continued outside City Hall, a crowd began to form. News of the water contamination had spread quickly, and the residents of Springville, concerned about their health and their future, were demanding answers. Ethan, upon leaving the meeting, was immediately surrounded by journalists and anxious citizens. With Sarah and Michael by his side, he decided to face the situation head-on. Friends and neighbors of Springville, he began, his voice echoing across the square. We are facing a critical moment. AgriFuture's actions are already threatening our most precious resource, our water. But we are not powerless. Together, we can protect our land and our future. His words seemed to inflame the crowd. Shouts of support and improvised signs began to appear. Clean water is a right. AgriFuture out were some of the phrases that could be heard. Meanwhile, at AgriFuture headquarters, Richard Miller watched the scene on television, his face a mask of contained frustration. He turned to his advisors. Intensify our public relations campaign. Offer compensation to affected residents. Do whatever is necessary, but we can't lose this project. Back at Golden Dawn, the farm had transformed into a center of resistance. Environmentalists, scientists, and volunteers were arriving in a constant flow, offering help and expertise. Sarah coordinated teams to conduct independent water tests throughout the region, seeking to map the real extent of the contamination. Ethan, in turn, worked tirelessly to unite local farmers. In an emotional meeting in the main barn, he presented a vision for the future. Imagine a cooperative of sustainable farmers, he proposed, his eyes shining with passion. Together, we can create a strong regional brand based on ethical and ecological practices. We don't need AgriFuture to prosper. We have everything we need right here. The idea was received with growing enthusiasm. Farmers who were previously hesitant now saw a viable alternative to the AgriFuture project. Meanwhile, Michael surprised everyone by announcing that he was redirecting part of Harrison Enterprises' resources to support the movement. It's time to use our business power for good, he declared in an impromptu press conference. We're going to show that ethical and sustainable businesses are the true future. As the days passed, tension in the region continued to grow. AgriFuture intensified its advertising campaign, promising state-of-the-art water cleaning technologies and generous compensation for the community. At the same time, reports of intimidation of farmers who refused to sell their lands began to emerge. One night, as Ethan worked late in his office, he heard a suspicious noise coming from the chicken coop. Upon investigating, he found two men trying to steal Goldie. In the ensuing confusion, Ethan managed to scare off the thieves, but not before hearing one of them mutter, "Boss Miller won't be happy about this." The incident made it clear that the battle was escalating to dangerous levels. Ethan doubled the security measures on the farm, aware that AgriFuture was willing to play dirty. The next day, news bombarded social media and local newspapers. Leaked photos showed AgriFuture executives in secret meetings with influential politicians, suggesting possible corrupt deals behind the scenes. The revelation caused an uproar in public opinion. Demonstrations erupted in front of City Hall and AgriFuture offices. The mayor, pressured from all sides, called an emergency public hearing to discuss the future of the project. As he prepared for what promised to be a decisive confrontation, Ethan reflected on the journey that had brought him here. From a simple art teacher to the leader of a movement that could shape the future of his community. Looking at Goldie, who was pecking peacefully on her perch, he couldn't help but smile. "Who would have thought, huh, old friend?" he murmured to the chicken. "It seems Dad knew exactly what he was doing when he left you to me." With a deep breath, Ethan prepared for the next day. The public hearing would be the moment of truth, not just for Golden Dawn, but for all of Springville. The future of the region was at stake, and he was determined to fight to the end. The sun had barely risen when Springville began to wake up with frenetic energy. The streets leading to the city's civic center were packed with people, all converging on the site of the public hearing. The air was charged with expectation and tension. Ethan arrived early, accompanied by Sarah, Michael, and a group of local farmers. As they approached the building, they were greeted by a crowd of supporters, waving signs and shouting words of encouragement. "They're all here for you, little brother," said Michael, placing his hand on Ethan's shoulder. "How you've given voice to something everyone felt, but didn't know how to express." Ethan nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility. "It's not for me," he replied. "It's for all of us, for our land, for our future." Inside the auditorium, the atmosphere was electrifying. On one side, AgriFuture representatives, impeccable in their expensive suits, displayed studied confidence. On the other, a colorful mixture of farmers, environmentalists, and ordinary citizens, united by a common cause. The mayor opened the session, his wavering voice betraying the pressure he felt. "We are here today to decide the future of our beloved Springville. We will hear all sides and make a decision that best serves our community." Richard Miller, CEO of AgriFuture, was the first to speak. With an impressive multimedia presentation, he painted a picture of prosperity and progress. "Imagine," he said, his voice smooth and convincing, "a Springville transformed into a center of agricultural innovation, thousands of jobs, cutting-edge technology, and a bright future for our young people. Yes, there have been setbacks, but we are committed to solving any environmental problem. Our new water purification technology." As Miller spoke, Ethan observed the audience's reactions. Some seemed impressed, others skeptical. He knew the battle would be difficult. When it was his turn to speak, Ethan took a deep breath and stood up. He had no elaborate presentations or grand promises, just the truth. "Friends and neighbors," he began, his voice firm, "AgriFuture offers us a vision of the future. But at what cost? They talk about jobs, but don't mention how many farmers will lose their lands. They talk about innovation, but ignore centuries of traditional knowledge that our community has accumulated." Ethan paused, his eyes scanning the room. "What we offer is not just an alternative. It's a path to a future where prosperity and sustainability go hand in hand, where our children inherit not just jobs, but fertile land and clean water." Sarah then took the floor, presenting scientific data on AgriFuture's environmental impact and contrasting them with the ecological benefits of Golden Dawn's practices. Her presentation, although less polished than AgriFuture's, was grounded in irrefutable facts. As the hearing progressed, witnesses from both sides were called. AgriFuture employees spoke about job opportunities, while local farmers shared moving stories about their lands and the fear of losing them. A crucial moment occurred when Mr. Johnson, trembling but determined, stood up to speak. "I've lived all my life on these lands," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "I've seen droughts, I've seen hard times, but I never thought I'd see the day when we'd have to fight against our own government to protect our water. What AgriFuture offers is not progress, it's destruction disguised as opportunity." His words seemed to touch something deep in the audience. Murmurs of agreement echoed through the room. Tension reached its peak when a group of independent scientists presented the results of water tests conducted throughout the region. The data was alarming, showing a clear correlation between AgriFuture's initial activities and the increase in contaminants in local water sources. Richard Miller, visibly disturbed, tried to discredit the results, but his previous confidence began to crumble. When all testimonies had been heard, the mayor announced that he would need time to deliberate. "This is a decision that will affect generations. It cannot be taken lightly," he declared. As the crowd dispersed, the mood was one of uncertainty. Ethan, exhausted but determined, gathered with his team. "We did everything we could," said Sarah, intertwining her fingers with his. "Now, we can only wait and trust that we made a difference." Michael, who had observed the entire hearing with experienced business eyes, added, "You planted a seed today. Regardless of the mayor's decision, people are awake to the importance of what you're doing." That night, as Springville anxiously awaited the decision, Ethan returned to Golden Dawn. Walking through the fields under the starry sky, he allowed himself a moment of reflection. He stopped at the chicken coop where Goldie was resting peacefully. "Who would have thought, huh?" he murmured to the chicken, "that you would be the beginning of all this." Suddenly his phone rang. It was the mayor. "Mr. Harrison," said the voice on the other end of the line, "I need you to come to my office immediately. I've made my decision." With his heart racing, Ethan prepared for what could be the most crucial moment of his journey so far. The future of Springville, of Golden Dawn, and of everything they had fought for was about to be decided. The night was unusually quiet when Ethan arrived at City Hall. The streets of Springville, normally vibrant even at night, seemed to hold their breath as if the entire city was waiting for the verdict that was about to be pronounced. In the mayor's office, Ethan found not only the municipal leader, but also Sarah, Michael, and to his surprise, Richard Miller from AgriFuture. The air in the room was dense with unspoken tension. The mayor, with deep dark circles evidencing sleepless nights, got straight to the point. "Gentlemen, ma'am, I've spent the last few hours reflecting deeply on everything that was presented. The decision I've made wasn't easy, but I believe it's the best for Springville's future." Everyone in the room held their breath. Ethan felt Sarah's hand squeeze his, seeking and offering support simultaneously. "After considering all aspects," the mayor continued, "I've decided to revoke AgriFuture's license to operate in our region." The reaction was immediate. Ethan and Sarah exchanged looks of contained joy, while Michael let out a sigh of relief. Richard Miller, on the other hand, looked as if he had been struck by lightning. "This is outrageous!" exclaimed Miller, his face red with anger. "You can't do this. We have contracts, commitments—" The mayor raised his hand, silencing him. "Mr. Miller, the risks to our community and environment are simply too high. The data is clear. By continuing with this project, we would be compromising not just our natural resources, but the future of entire generations." Ethan, feeling it was the moment to intervene, stepped forward. "Mr. Mayor, if I may, I'd like to propose an alternative." All eyes turned to him, curious. "What Golden Dawn represents isn't just a farm, but a model of sustainable development. I propose that we work together, local farmers, scientists, and even the City Hall, to expand this model. We can create an agricultural cooperative that not only preserves our traditions and environment, but also generates jobs and innovation." Sarah, picking up the cue, added, "Our studies show that we could create as many jobs as AgriFuture promised, but in a sustainable way and with long-term benefits for the community." The mayor listened attentively, a glimmer of interest in his eyes. "It's an interesting proposal, Mr. Harrison, but we would need resources, expertise." It was then that Michael surprised everyone. "Harrison Enterprises is willing to invest in this project. We can provide the initial capital and management expertise needed to make this a reality." Richard Miller, who had been observing the scene in disbelief, finally spoke. "You're crazy if you think this is going to work. Large-scale, sustainable agriculture? It's a utopian dream." Ethan turned to Miller, his gaze firm but not hostile. "Mr. Miller, I understand your frustration. But what if, instead of seeing us as enemies, you considered this as an opportunity? AgriFuture has resources and knowledge that could be valuable if applied responsibly. Why not join us in this new vision?" The proposal caught everyone by surprise, including Miller himself, who was momentarily speechless. The mayor, seeing an opportunity to unite divergent forces, intervened. "Gentlemen, this could be the beginning of something revolutionary. Springville could become a model of sustainable development for the entire country, perhaps even for the world." The following hours were dedicated to intense discussions. Plans were sketched, ideas debated, and slowly a common vision began to emerge. Richard Miller, initially skeptical, began to see the potential of repositioning AgriFuture as a leader in sustainable agricultural technologies. When the sun began to rise, tinting Springville's sky with shades of pink and gold, a preliminary agreement had been reached. AgriFuture would redirect its investments to support the new agricultural cooperative, focusing on developing technologies that would complement traditional sustainable practices. Ethan, exhausted but exultant, left City Hall to find an anxious crowd waiting for news. With Sarah and Michael by his side, he announced the outcome of the negotiations. "Friends, neighbors," he began, his voice hoarse from fatigue but full of emotion, "today marks the beginning of a new era for Springville. We not only avoided a threat to our way of life, but we created an opportunity to prosper in a way that honors our land and our traditions." The news was received with an explosion of joy. People hugged, cried, and laughed, feeling that they had not only averted a disaster, but achieved something truly special. As the city celebrated, Ethan allowed himself a moment of reflection. He looked at Sarah, who was smiling through tears of joy, at Michael, who seemed to have found a new purpose, and at the happy faces around him. At that moment, he fully understood his father's true legacy. It wasn't about a chicken or about money or even about a farm. It was about the courage to fight for what is right, the wisdom to unite people for a common cause, and the vision of a better future for all. With the rising sun bathing Springville in golden light, Ethan felt they were on the threshold of something extraordinary. The real work was just beginning, but for the first time in a long time, the future seemed bright and full of possibilities. The months following the historic decision were a time of intense transformation for Springville. Golden Dawn was no longer just a farm, but the epicenter of an agricultural revolution that was rapidly spreading throughout the region. Ethan, now recognized as a visionary leader, spent his days divided between supervising the farm's expansion and numerous meetings with farmers, scientists, and investors. The Sustainable Agricultural Cooperative project was taking shape and dimension every day. On a sunny morning, Ethan walked through the expanded fields of Golden Dawn with Sarah and Michael. The contrast with the small farm from a few months ago was impressive. "Who would have thought we'd be here a year ago?" reflected Sarah, observing the new ecological chicken coops that extended as far as the eye could see. Michael, who had become a staunch defender of the project, added, "And to think I almost ended up on the wrong side of history. This place, it's changing more than just agriculture." Ethan smiled, remembering the journey that had brought them here. "It's true, we're redefining what progress means." The trio stopped in front of a new structure, an agricultural research and innovation center. Scientists from all over the country, and even from abroad, had been attracted by the promise of developing technologies that harmonize traditional practices with modern advances. Inside the center, they found Richard Miller, the former CEO of AgriFuture, now a reluctant but increasingly engaged partner in the project. He was poring over plans for a new sustainable irrigation system. "Ethan," called Miller, his tone surprisingly enthusiastic, "come see this. I think we've finally got a design that maximizes water efficiency without compromising soil health." The scene was surreal, the former adversary now working side by side with them towards a common goal. It was a testament to the transformative power of Ethan's vision. As they toured the center, Sarah excitedly explained the various ongoing projects, from developing more drought-resistant crop varieties to advanced composting and renewable energy systems. "The most incredible thing," she said, "is how we're integrating the traditional knowledge of local farmers with these new technologies. It's a true fusion of ancestral wisdom and modern innovation." As the day progressed, Ethan was called for an important video conference. Representatives from the federal government and international organizations were interested in learning more about the Springville model, as the project had been nicknamed. During the call, Ethan spoke passionately about the principles behind Golden Dawn: sustainability, community, and ethical innovation. The questions were many, and the interest was palpable. "Mr. Harrison," said a UN representative, "what you're doing in Springville could be a model for addressing global challenges such as climate change and food security. We'd like to propose a partnership to expand this concept to other regions." The proposal was exciting and a little scary. Ethan knew that accepting would mean elevating the project to a completely new level, with even greater challenges and responsibilities. After the call, Ethan met with his core team, Sarah, Michael, Mr. Johnson, and some other community leaders who had joined the project. "We have an incredible opportunity here," he began, "but I need to know if we're ready for this. It's no longer just about Springville. We could impact communities all over the world." The discussion that followed was intense and exciting. Each member of the group shared their perspectives, fears, and hopes. In the end, the decision was unanimous. They would accept the challenge. That night, as the sun set over Springville, Ethan found a moment of quietude. He walked to the old chicken coop where it all began, now preserved as a kind of memorial. There was Goldie, the golden chicken that had been the catalyst for this incredible journey. Now elderly but still majestic, she pecked peacefully, oblivious to the revolution she had helped unleash. Ethan crouched beside her, gently stroking her feathers. "Thank you, old friend," he murmured. "Dad was right. You really were the greatest treasure he could have left me." As he gazed at the horizon, Ethan reflected on the journey that had brought him here, from a simple art teacher to the leader of a global sustainable agriculture movement. It was an enormous responsibility, but also an incredible opportunity to make a difference. The future was full of challenges, that was certain. Expanding the model to other regions, facing established interests, adapting to different cultures and climates, all of this awaited them. But Ethan knew he wasn't alone. He had a strong community by his side, dedicated partners, and a clear vision of what was possible when people united for a greater purpose. As the first stars began to dot the sky, Ethan felt a mixture of gratitude, determination, and hope. Golden Dawn was no longer just the name of a farm. It had become a symbol of a new dawn for agriculture and humanity's relationship with the earth. With one last look at Goldie and the field stretching out before him, Ethan prepared for the challenges and opportunities that awaited him. The real work, he knew, was just beginning. 5 years had passed since that night when Ethan contemplated the future in front of the old chicken coop. Springville had transformed into a beacon of sustainable agricultural innovation, attracting visitors and scholars from around the world. It was a sunny spring morning, and Golden Dawn was buzzing with activity. An international delegation composed of world leaders, environmentalists, and UN representatives was arriving for the inauguration of the Global Center for Sustainable Agriculture. Ethan, now with a few grey strands at his temples, adjusted his tie, a rare concession to the formality of the event. By his side, Sarah, radiant in a floral dress, held the hand of a 4-year-old girl, little Lucy, the fruit of the couple's love and a living symbol of the future they were fighting for. Michael approached, impeccable in his suit, but with a gleam in his eyes that spoke of an internal transformation much greater than any external change. "Ready, little brother?" he asked with a smile. Ethan nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. "As ready as I can be." Together they walked to the podium set up in the center of the farm. The crowd stretching out before them was a living testament to the impact Golden Dawn had achieved. Local farmers side by side with international dignitaries, scientists animatedly conversing with school-age children. Ethan began his speech, his voice laden with emotion. 5 years ago, we were here fighting to save a small farm and a way of life. Today, we are inaugurating a center that promises to change the future of global agriculture. But the real change, the true revolution, happened in the hearts and minds of each of us. He paused, his eyes scanning the crowd, recognizing familiar faces. Mr. Johnson, now a respected consultant in traditional agricultural practices, Richard Miller, who had become a passionate advocate for sustainable agricultural technologies, the mayor, re-elected on a platform focused on sustainable development. What we've built here, Ethan continued, is not just a model of agriculture. It's a model of how we can live in harmony with nature, how we can prosper without destroying, how we can innovate without losing our roots. Ethan's words were punctuated by images projected on large screens, verdant fields stretching to the horizon, cutting-edge technologies working side by side with ancestral practices, once impoverished communities now flourishing with new life. But our journey is far from over, he declared. The center we inaugurate today is a commitment to the future, a future where hunger is a distant memory, where our cities breathe clean air, where our waters run crystal clear, and where every child inherits a healthier planet than the one we received. At this moment, Sarah took the stage with Lucy. The girl carefully carried an object covered by a golden cloth. Ethan smiled, picking up his daughter. "And speaking of inheritance," he said, his voice softening, "I'd like to share something special with you." Carefully, he removed the cloth, revealing a golden cage. Inside it, a young chicken with feathers as bright as the sun looked curiously at the crowd. "This," announced Ethan, "is Goldie's great-granddaughter, the chicken my father left me, and that started this entire journey. She represents not just our history, but our ongoing commitment to the future." A murmur of admiration ran through the audience. Goldie's story had become almost legendary, a symbol of the power of small beginnings. "Today," Ethan continued, "this young chicken will be released in the fields of our new school farm, where children from all over the world will come to learn about sustainable agriculture, ecology, and the importance of caring for our planet." With these words, Ethan descended from the stage, followed by Sarah, Lucy, and Michael. Together they walked to a nearby field, surrounded by the emotional crowd. Gently they opened the cage, allowing the young chicken to take her first steps in freedom. The moment was symbolic and powerful. As the chicken curiously explored her new environment, Ethan couldn't help but think about how a simple inheritance had triggered such a profound transformation. Turning to the crowd, Ethan concluded, "Let this be a reminder to all of us. Every action, no matter how small it may seem, has the power to change the world. Each of us carries the seeds of change. It's up to us to nurture them, cultivate them, and allow them to flourish." Ethan's words were received with thunderous applause. Tears of emotion and smiles of hope were visible on many faces. As the official ceremony came to an end and people dispersed to explore the new center, Ethan found a moment of quiet. He walked to a small nearby hill, from where he could see the entire expanse of golden dawn. Sarah joined him, intertwining her fingers with his. "What are you thinking about?" she asked softly. Ethan smiled, his eyes scanning the transformed landscape. "I'm thinking about how it all began. About Dad, about Goldie, about all the people who believed in this impossible vision." Michael joined them, Lucy in his arms. "You know," he said, "I think I finally understand what Dad meant by the greatest fortunes come in the most unexpected packages." Ethan nodded, feeling a wave of gratitude. He gave us much more than an inheritance. He gave us a mission. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with golden hues reminiscent of Goldie's feathers, the Harrison family contemplated the future. The Global Center for Sustainable Agriculture was just the beginning. There was still much work to be done, challenges to be overcome, and lives to be transformed. But at that moment, observing the legacy they had built and the future that opened up before them, Ethan felt a deep peace. The dream of a greener, fairer, and more sustainable tomorrow was no longer just a dream. It was an ever-evolving reality, nurtured by the collective effort of countless individuals who, like him, dared to believe in the power of a new dawn. And so, as the first stars began to dot the sky, Golden Dawn continued to shine, a beacon of hope and inspiration for the world, proving that sometimes the greatest revolutions begin with the simplest gestures and the most unexpected gifts.